good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out to our Littleton School District 2015-16 proposed budget and warrant hearing. And we welcome you and thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here with us tonight. We want to present an overview of the budget and the warrant articles that we'll be presenting at our deliberative session in February. A number of the administration and board members will present some things tonight, and we welcome questions. If you have any specific questions, we'd love to answer those as we go through the slides. Feel free to do so. And if you do want further information, please feel free to call the SAU if you have particular details you want on any of the information we'll be presenting tonight. We encourage you and invite you to do that also. So we're just going to run through these slides. And this is a general overview. Again, all the details of the budget we went through over many months, line by line, but we don't want to get into all the minutia of all the detailed budgets. So we're going to give you an overview tonight of our budget and also the warrant articles that we'll be presenting. Okay, Adam? So Article 1 is to elect the following school district officers. The school board, 1 member for 3 years, moderator, 1 for 1 year, school district clerk, 1 for 1 year, and treasurer, 1 for 1 year. Article 2 is just some general housekeeping. It's on the warrant every year. General acceptance of records. Shall the report to the school district agents, auditors, committees, or officers be be accepted and placed on file. And then Article 3 is our operating budget, and it reads as follows. Shall the Littleton School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant or other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with warrant or amended by vote in the first session for the purposes set forth therein totaling $16,514,210. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $16,571,380, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of Littleton School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 up to the issue of revising the operating budget only. So the budget we're proposing tonight is approximately $60,000 less than last year's budget if we were to have to go to the default budget. So we're going to give you some particulars of what that looks like, breaking down into some general categories. The operating budget itself is we're proposing of $16,514,210 represents an increase of $176,967 or 1.1% increase over FY 2015 budget. What that relates to as far as tax impact is a 96-cent impact. Now that's assuming that that budget is spent according to the number that's up there, but that number, as you know, has a tendency to fluctuate, and we will not know, as the bullet point says there, final tax rate will be set in October of 2015 and depends on state adequacy aid, Littleton assessed valuation, unassigned fund balance, and other variables. So there's the good potential that number will not be 96 cents. It may be something different. We were able to return a larger than normal undesignated fund balance this year due to some factors in excess revenue in some areas that we were not expecting, and also decreased expenses in some areas that we had not anticipated. So altogether, that equated to a larger than usual undesignated fund balance, which was returned to the taxpayers to reduce the tax rate. So as you can see, we don't really know until we get closer to the actual tax rate setting what that number will look like, but if this budget was spent in its entirety, it would represent a 96-cent increase in the tax rate. We want to give you a little philosophy of why we do what we do and how we do it, and then our superintendent and business administrator will go over more of the details, but the Littleton School Board is dedicated to a process that accurately represents the actual costs necessary to provide a high quality and effective education for the students of Littleton. We're very aware of the responsibility that we have as school board members, also members of the community, that the decisions we make affect everyone in the community. Ultimately, our charge is to present and provide the greatest and most benefit to our students. That's our first charge. But we want to do that in a responsible manner. We want to do that with sensitivity to understanding where we are in our community as far as our financial resources. We also understand that we're in an environment where we are dealing with enrollment, which we'll see a slide in a couple of minutes, that is either flat or declining. So we have begun the process of reviewing all different parts of our budget as far as allocation of resources and how we can communicate and collaborate with some of the other SAUs in the area to offer joint programs. So hopefully this year we'll have some more positive information along that way. But just to give you a basic philosophy, we are dedicated to the process that when we present a budget, it represents as accurately as we can the actual numbers that we're going to be needing to operate the school efficiently and effectively. So at this time, I'd like our superintendent, Dr. David Bickford, to come up and go over a few more details at the actual budget itself.
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming us here to be part of the budget review process. When the board asked me to become your interim superintendent in August, one of their charges to me was to work on the process of budgeting for the Littleton schools. And what I brought with me and the way we approached this was for, first of all, the administration to meet with the faculty and staff to develop a program-driven draft. That is, to look at our current program, to look at the areas that we thought needed to be extended, the areas that we thought that needed to be maintained. We developed a draft proposal that was an increase of 5.4% over the 2014-15 budget. We presented this to the board, and in the meantime, the administration returned and developed a companion draft that was level funded. That is, dollar for dollar, the same amount from 2014-15 to the proposal for 2015-16. We brought that level funded budget to the board, looked at what it meant in terms of program continuation and program development, and the board gave administration the directive to bring a third draft that had no more than a 2% increase over the 14-15 budget. Administration returned with a 2% budget, what I call a 2% budget, presented it to the board, and the board met with the Littleton Budget Committee for the review of that 2% budget. The Budget Committee deliberated and sent a communication to the board that they would like to see a 0% increase, and that furthermore that they would like a commitment of $540,000 return to reduce taxes in the subsequent school year. At the board's request, the administration then met in a working session with the board members. We looked at all areas of the budget and determined that we could make we proposed a decrease of $143,000 with the resulting increase of our proposed budget of 1.1% over the 2014-15 adopted budget. Then the school board brought this to a joint school board budget committee meeting, presented it, the budget committee received it, and at this point, this is the draft that we are working with, which is an increase of 1.1% over the 2014-15 budget, or a total of $176,967. Go on to the next. Oh, you're there. Now, it's important to realize, I think, for the public, that the majority of the increases are due to wages and benefit increases. $102,000 $300. Part of that increase is driven by a reconfiguration of the New Hampshire retirement system. Teachers and professional staff, the town school district's contribution to that increased from 14.16% to 15.67%. So that is a little over 1.5% increase, which represents a significant amount of dollars required of the school district to fund the pension system. For other employees, the increase was from 10.77% of the contribution to 11.17%. Together, both of those state-mandated increases account for $91,400 of the $102,300. Here are where the increases occur in the budget. Regular education sees an increase of a little over $14,000, $14,178. Vocational education accounts for $48,609. Co-curricular activities, $4,635. Student support services, $90,631. Instructional staff support, $46,311. Board and Superintendent's Office, $43,530, and the lion's share of that goes to increasing your administration, your superintendent, from part-time to full-time. Business services increase $1,419. Transportation, $9,144. Technology, $29,920. And district support food services, $15,000. If you go on to the next page, the decreases in the budget are $39,775 for special education costs, $11,212 for administration, $33,506 for operations and management. Food service sees a decrease of $15,700, and there has been a $26,217 decrease in the debt service line item. So the net increase of the results of the additions and the decreases is $176,967. So it's important, I think, to realize what parts of the budget require what proportion of the budget. The largest portion is salaries. That's a little over $7,874,000. The second largest cost is benefits. That is $4,102,000, followed by the purchased services, and that is contracted services that we are required to provide, and that we do not have staff members providing internally. of $1,377,000. Debt and other costs, $969,000. Supplies at $866,000, and equipment at $222,000. Mr. Allen referred to the enrollment, and it's important to see that what our current enrollment is, and I will speak briefly about the enrollment trends with the next slide. But currently we have 383 students at Lakeway. At Daisy Bronson Middle School, 112. In Littleton High School, 231, for a total of 726 Littleton students. Special programs enrollment. The Career and Technical Center has 180 students, of which 84 are Littleton students and 96 are students who are tuitioned in. Special education has 126 students, with 26 enrolled at the Littleton Academy, 24 of whom are Littleton students and 2 of whom are tuition students. Here you can see the 10-year trend in enrollment. This was prepared for us by the New England School Development Council. And you can see that we have experienced a drop from about 961 students 10 years ago to about 725 students this year. Any discrepancies between figures in one place and another are data were collected at different times. We have a reasonably transient student population, with students coming and going on a fairly regular basis. If you go to slide number 14, here you can see a projection of enrollment out from 2014 forward 10 years to 2024. And you can see a slight erosion in the numbers from 225 to a projected 686, but the overall trend line is flattening out. Now, this is quite a challenge for the board and for the community, because we have experienced an erosion of enrollment, and we must be very mindful of the services that we provide and the cost at which those services are provided. The tally of personnel is, you can see that we have experienced, well, we compare full-time employees and part-time employees, year-round employees, and school year employees, and there is a cross-meshing of these. So you can't compare directly one to the other, but we have 166 full-time employees this year. We are budgeting for 164 next year, with 24 part-time employees remaining from this year to next year. Year-round employees, we expect to have 37 this year, 37 next year, and school year employees being reduced from 153 to 151. One of the areas that both members of the community and members of the budget committee have made really clear to the board, and really was made very clear to me as we began this process was look to, as much as possible, contain increasing healthcare costs. And you can see that this current budget has a little over $2,400,000 worth of healthcare costs attributed to the school district. Our proposed budget trims that slightly to just a tad over $2,280,000, which is a net decrease of $130,000 or a 5.4% reduction. Now, these costs are achieved through several means. One is our current year's increases were less than we had anticipated. That in issuing contracts to the custodians and food service personnel, they have assumed a greater percentage of their health care premium. That the projected rates for insurance for the professional staff driver plan. Now, driver plan is the standard by which the amounts of money for the contributions to the health care premiums are determined. And in each case, there are several options among our employee groups, and the driver plan is the one that contributes the maximum to that particular offering. Employees can take the dollar amount and apply it elsewhere if they choose to go with a different plan. We are projecting a 4.8% increase for the professional. We have budgeted 4.8% for the professional staff driver plan, and we have budgeted a 5.6% increase for the support staff driver plan. When we met with the Budget Committee urged us to look at several line items in our budget where we have traditionally budgeted the maximum liability we felt we had, and for the last few years, the actual costs have come in under budget. So at their urging for a closer margin, they asked us to look at one area, which is what we budget for health insurance. So the board did trim their health insurance budget items in keeping with the Budget Committee's request for us to look at this. So both of those are slightly less than the predictions for the maximum liability that we have, or the responsibility we have for those insurance payments. And we also anticipate a $28,397 saving if the support staff agreement is approved. We negotiated with the support staff. We did negotiate some changes to their health care benefits, which resulted in a lower premium. So if that is approved by the voters, then we will experience a modest saving there. Tom, would you care to walk us through the revenues? Okay. Echoes. You all set? Introduce Tom Mangles, our business manager, who is more familiar with the funding formulas and revenue streams than I am right now.
Thank you. Good evening. We have quite a few lines that make up all of the various categories of revenue. They all change from year to year. Obviously, everything for the next year is an estimate, an anticipated number, rather than anything that's concrete. One of the larger numbers that we see is the state adequacy aid grant. 15-16 will be the second year of the adequacy aid grant that's published at this point. We still can't, that'll be $3,677,000, but we still can't bank on that yet. These numbers are revised during the course of the year. In fact, although we're looking at that same 3,677 for this year, we have been told by the Department of Education that they won't have the final numbers for us until April of this year. So next year, of course, is perhaps a bit more nebulous. So this chart basically shows that the lion's share of our revenue support comes from the local taxpayer at $10,600,000. The state, with both the adequacy aid, vocational tuition aid, some other support, is $4,000,001. Our federal grants, we hold constant so as not to disrupt budget from year to year. We use $650,000 because the expenditure for federal grants will be the same as the revenue, so it has no net effect on taxes. The other district funds include our food service sales, rentals, E-rates, tuition from other districts incoming, that's $635,000, and miscellaneous federal is Medicare and the qualified school construction bond interest reimbursement are the major drivers there. So the total, including your tax dollars, is $16,514,000. The next slide. Without your tax dollars, we're looking at the revenue that we raise, just those same numbers, just without the taxes. And you can see that 69% of the outside revenue does come from the state. 11% is our local numbers, as I said, with the food service and the rentals, the other items included in that, and so on. Any questions? Mr. Ward.
On the foundation aid,
Sir.
Littleton received additional funds for a period of time under the hold harmless agreement. And because I believe it was 2010, they changed the formula, but they put a hold harmless in so that no district lost what they were receiving. And I think it either started last year or starting this year. They're actually going, or I think I'm almost positive it was last year, that they actually determine what your, what do they call them, ADMs, average daily membership, and then basically fund the foundation aid back on that. With us losing 75 students from 2010 to what's projected for this year, has any calculation gone in for a reduction in foundation aid? Because more likely than not, because we have less students and through some other adjustments in the formula primarily related to poverty, we're one of the districts that would be getting less. So have you had dialogue, and I know it's hard, Tom, from your perspective, as to what is anticipated?
Well, actually, under the new guidelines, the Department of Education has to report the numbers based on last year's enrollment in October of the current year. So yes, there was significant scrambling in Concord, and the numbers that we're showing here are those that were presented from the department in late October, early November. So that's been taken into account.
That these numbers would be good for this coming fiscal year?
No, they informed us that The final adjustments will be made in April, but it was the best information available at the time.
How did our number change from a year ago to this year? Do you have an idea on that?
Looking at the budget for this current year compared to the budget that I'm using for next year, it's a $14,000 increase. But again, that's based on forecasts and projections and what happens with everyone else. Any other revenue questions? Sure. Default budget. We have to have a budget in which to operate. In a traditional town meeting, the budget is determined at the meeting, and the meeting officially isn't over until there is a budget in place. With an SB2 town, because we do ballots, we still have to have a budget at the end of the balloting session. If the operating budget as proposed is defeated, the board does request the option to come back and take one other bite if they choose to revise a budget. If not, the default budget goes into effect. The default budget is the budget for this current year, as approved, making some adjustments for contractual obligations, legal obligations, and one-time expenditures either in or out. Rather than the 5 or 6 columns that you usually see, we've tried to simplify it a little bit this time to just get down to the numbers more quickly. We do have the health insurance premiums that are in the contractual rates that you already saw in the previous slide. That is added to this year's budget. The teachers' agreement is in year 3 next year, so the contractual increases are added for the default. The retirement rate changes for all employees are added to the default. Property and liability insurance, again, it's a contractual obligation based on the estimate. Bus contract, last year we renegotiated the bus contract for an additional 5-year period. That is the increase over this current year's budget number for next year. As we pay down principal on our bonds, both the 2002 bond for the renovation of this building and a 2010 bond for the CTC in middle school, each year we have less interest expense. So we recognize the reduction in interest expense. And included in the approved appropriation for this year were some funds that were designated from fund balance for last year to go to capital reserve funds. We consider those one-time expenditures and take them out of the default. So if we end up with a default budget, those items aren't included. They stand on their own. So that brings us to the default budget of $16,571,380.
The next warrant article is the support staff collective bargaining agreement. To see if the district will vote to approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Littleton School District and the Littleton support staff, which calls for the following increases in salaries and reduction in benefits at the current staffing levels. For fiscal year 2015-16, the estimated increase from the prior fiscal year is $4,854. For 2016-17, the estimated increase is $35,131. For the total is $39,985. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $4,854 for the upcoming fiscal year. Such sum representing the additional cost attributable to the increase in salaries and benefits over those of the appropriation at current staffing levels paid in the prior fiscal year. Just a little bit on the support staff agreement. We're doing a 2-year agreement. We added a low-cost insurance plan added to the other offerings. In 2015-16, the employees have a 0-step increase, and for 2016-17, there's a 1-step increase for employees who are on schedule. Off-schedule employees get a percentage increase in each employee's wage rate. Therefore, all increases on and off schedule is 1.7% each year. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, Article 5 is just a notice of a special meeting. Shall Littleton School District, if warrant Article 4 is defeated, authorize the governing body to call one special meeting at its option to address warrant Article 4 cost items only. So that's what Tom referred to. If the budget does not pass, we have the option of calling a special meeting to revisit that. Okay? Next one. Article 6, School Street property. This article is part of an overall plan that we, the board administration, is looking at to review and consolidate our facilities, where we are in our facilities. This particular article is dealing with our School Street property, which is our present SAU office. Our plan is to move our SAU operations to our other property that is on Maple Street, and that was previously the SAU office. The property on School Street has a number of issues, a number of which that if we were to address would far outweigh the cost of investing in that property for its value. So our overall plan, as this article states, shall the school district vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $19,800 for the demolition of the SAU office building at 102 School Street, Littleton, New Hampshire. This will be a non-lapsing appropriation pursuant to RSA 32:7/6 and will not lapse until the demolition is complete or by June 30th, 2019, whichever is sooner. So that cost, $19,800, includes the demolition of the building. It includes inspections for asbestos, lead paint, and any other hazardous things that we may have to address before the demolition. The filling in of the foundation and leveling that piece of property over the foundation. Our long-term goal with that property is to increase our parking. We are in a situation where we really do not have much parking in and around the school area. And also have the possibility of bringing, we have another storage shed that the school district has had for a while over on Washington Street. The possibility of bringing that storage shed closer on site so all of our storage is consolidated in one place, so our custodial staff has a much easier time getting stuff back and forth. But this will be the first step in that process. We are in the process of renovating the Maple Street property, and our goal is to have the SE offices moved into that property by August of this year, 2015. So our goal is, once that is done, to be able to have permission to level that property and begin the process of creating more parking in the area. Okay, any questions to that, Brian?
Jim, when the other building was taken down, which is currently using, I don't remember exactly what it was, but the numbers seems to be around $80,000 was expended to take the building down, plus to bring the fill in for the parking. Obviously, this does not include doing a project of that scope.
No, this just includes leveling the house, breaking up the foundation, filling in the hole, leveling the hole. But the actual grading of the parking, that's a whole nother project that this is not addressing.
When do you plan on coming back to the voters to request additional funds so that that could be complete? Because I know there was drainage issues in a whole series, and
Yep.
at some time it would be paved. That you don't plan on doing that this year?
Not this year. We need time to do a little engineering study. I know that we've talked to George Broder a number of times about some plans, but we want to get a very comprehensive plan for how we're going to grade that entire parking lot with the drainage. So that'll be forthcoming. Okay. Any other questions on this article? Okay. And do you want to do these?
Article 7 is the School Facilities Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund. Shall the Littleton School District raise and appropriate up to the sum of $50,000 to be placed in the School Facilities Maintenance Capital Reserve Fund, which was created March 16, 1993. Such sum to be funded from the June 30th, 2015 unassigned fund balance surplus available for transfer on July 1st, 2015. Currently, in the Facilities Maintenance Fund as of November 30th, we have $130,565. We recently funded a roof out of that for around $80,000. Maybe it was a year or two ago now. Time flies when you're having fun, but we would like to keep that maintenance reserve fund up to snuff. Any questions on that one? Brian?
Are there any plans to expend any money out of that fund in the coming year?
Possible, but we haven't made any decisions yet.
The reason I asked was that last spring, well, actually early summer, there was a request to use surplus of about $335,000 for 3 projects, which included a new roof for the gymnasium, oil tanks, piping at Lakeway, and I think the third thing was, what the heck was it? There was a...
Safety equipment.
What's that?
Safety equipment?
To relocate, to use the generator that was here and take that down to Lakeway. Now, that was presented to the community that those were emergency and safety concerns and that we wanted to address and to use surplus to fund those particular initiatives. And I guess I'm asking a question is, do you plan on using this money for those projects? And number 2 is, why weren't warrant articles to address those particular issues incorporated into this year's budgetary process?
Our initial budget included those safety items and the capital improvements. In the process of cutting back on the budget, we took them out. We realized that we have a legal obligation to replace the fuel lines on the from the fuel tanks to the buildings at both the Academy building and at Lakeway. We are looking to possibly pay for that through this year's operating budget, or I would bring to the board any request for the capital reserve funds. But at this point, we're not sure where that will fall.
So you plan on using this year's surplus to fund those particular initiatives, or just the oil tanks?
Right now, we're talking about just about the oil lines. We're not certain. I mean, we've been advised that if we're digging to dig up the oil lines, that it makes sense to replace the tanks at the same time. The tanks were installed in the 1980s. There is about a 30-year lifetime on the tanks. But because we haven't had the opportunity on my watch to be able to come up with a capital improvements plan, we remain somewhat uncertain beyond the lines. We're experiencing right now some heating problems at Lakeway the last week and into this week. So we're not certain what that's going to mean for us. So I don't mean to be cagey about it, but we are uncertain where that will fall. We don't consider them to be surplus funds this year. If they're unexpended funds, we're aware that there is a request on the part of the Budget Committee to return some of those funds to reduce taxes going forward. So we're balancing out those requests.
I guess it's begging the question, if we have a capital reserve fund, why aren't those funds being used to fund what you're describing versus using potentially unexpended funds?
It's a judgment call, and it's as simple as that.
Can you explain what the judgment call is?
The capital reserve funds are just exactly that, reserved. No one expected the heating system problems that we're having. So it's like having a personal savings account. Do you spend it down for this particular activity, or do you hold it against some sort of unforeseen and serious problem?
Correct me if I'm wrong, if the $50,000 goes into the capital reserve fund, with what Ann said was approximately $130,000, you would have $180,000 in that capital reserve fund. How much do you anticipate the repiping and the oil tanks are going to run? I know George Broder's been working on developing budgets for you in certain projects. What is the upset?
The estimate for both the tanks and the lines right now are in the neighborhood of $160,000.
So, I guess I watched the last budget hearing, and the presentation at that hearing was that this isn't optional, this is mandatory. Is that a fair statement?
The line replacement is mandatory.
And how much of the 160 is that?
It's about half.
Okay. I know when we talked about last year doing the encumbrances, which for technical reasons weren't available, have you considered going to the voters to request a warrant article to use unexpended funds for that particular purpose? That's what the town does a lot of times on different projects, of where they say, we've got this project and we'd like to use the unexpended funds and we'd like your permission to do it.
We did not put that forward as a proposal.
Now, as far as Tom Mangles told me a couple months ago, and I don't know if it's still an operative fund amount, was that there was approximately $900,000 in all of the cumulative reserve accounts, including the new emergency account that got funded, the special ed and all of that. Now, I don't know if that's still an operative number. Is that, Tom, roughly?
Yes, 939.
So 939. Okay, so if you've got 939 and you're adding $80,000 more to the various funds, why would you be using surplus funds to fund something like that? And more importantly, why aren't you going to the voters for it?
It's within the board's purview to allocate those funds. We're not certain where we're going to be coming out. Those reserve funds are dedicated to the purpose for which they were set aside. For example, the education of handicapped students is earmarked for that. If we were to receive a student enrolled who has severe special needs and had to tuition that student out, one student could wipe out that entire amount. So it's that dilemma that we face about being cautious and minding the stewardship of the funds for which they're earmarked. We did not, I mean, as I brought up earlier, we just did not propose, administration did not propose that we fund the oil tanks from the unexpended fund balance. I believe under New Hampshire statute, because if it fails, then we're prohibited from doing that, from taking that action. That would put us very much in a difficult position, the law saying, on the one hand, we must replace the land, or the regulatory agencies saying we must replace the lines, and the other hand said the voters saying absolutely no. So that entered into our discussion.
Well, that's true on a lot of things that have to be delivered through the school system, that there are mandates, but the process is to ask the voters for permission to expend their money on certain projects. And I've been on the school board and had the pleasure of serving 8 years since 1981, and I've never seen the town of Littleton turn down what you're presenting, basically. That there is a need to do it. We have, God, I think in Ann's tenure, we probably replaced those oil tanks a couple times already. So that, you know, I've never seen the town not do it. And what concerns me is that to expend monies that have not been authorized is not a good precedent, because I think what the town would like to see is what your vision is, what you see as problems and challenges, and then go to the voters, rather than saying, well, we don't want to go to the voters because the voters might say no, therefore we won't be able to do it. That's not historically the way the relationship has been between the school. And, you know, when the governor was here for the summit, one of the things we were able to celebrate was that the town has supported the school for improved facilities of $19 million in the last 10 years. We are spending with this year's budget $22,700 per student. This town has not been penurious in their support of the school system. So the presumption that we can't ask the voters because the voters might say no is not part of our historical relationship between the taxpayers and the town. And the roof on the gym is 26 years old. When Ann and I were on the board, we passed a bond for $345,000 to do 10 roofs at one time. I don't know why you're not going to the voters to ask permission, and you have flexibility to either go for it directly as a warrant article or do what the town has been doing in recent years, which is to allocate surplus. But to do neither and then plan on spending the money is, you know, it's not as transparent as I think would be helpful to the school system, because you are spending a lot of money, and I think it's important that you communicate with the community. And you have, these are reasonable projects. Putting a generator at Lakeway is a reasonable project. But to take the position that we don't want to go to the voters because they might say no, that does not create as good a relationship as we've had in the past and would like to have in the future.
Yeah, I think your remarks are well taken. We definitely will take them into consideration as we go forward.
I think you really should trust the voters because they support the school system here. And I really hope that you'll do that, because these are good projects. The 26-year-olds, we just put a lot of money into the gymnasium, and not to replace a 26-year-old roof, but can present a problem. I mean, usually the lifespan of a roof in the North Country is if you get 20 years, you've done well.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I am sorry we didn't have this conversation a couple months ago, but we are where we are, and I certainly, personally, will take this into consideration as we go forward. If I'm here next year putting the budget together, certainly will be part of what I will consider.
Thank you.
Article 8 is replacement of equipment, capital reserve fund. Shall the Littleton School District raise and appropriate up to the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the replacement of equipment, capital reserve fund created May 24th, 1984. Such sum to be funded from the June 30th, 2015 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2015. Currently in that fund, we have $72,000. Any questions?
Excuse me, Anna, I'm out of here with you. How much is in that fund?
$72,000.
Thank you.
In the last capital reserve fund for educationally disabled children, shall the Littleton School District raise and appropriate up to the sum of $10,000 to be placed in the capital reserve fund for educationally disabled children created March 13th, 1997. Such sum to be funded from the June 30th, 2015 undesignated fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2015. And in that fund currently, we do have $141,000, but as you know, if we do have to place a student out of district, depending on their needs, they could cost at least up to $100,000 or more. Any questions? Okay.
There is one element of the report that we neglected to put in the slides, and I've asked Tom to prepare a handout for you on what the proposed budget would mean on your local tax rate. So if Tom can come up. Here, if you give those to me, I'll pass them out.
Whenever we speak about tax rates, we always comment that there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces that we can't even estimate reasonably at this point. But we also want to try to show you where we think we are at this point and what we have going forward. So what you have is a comparison of the current year's budget as adjusted for the tax rate setting that happened this past fall. The second column is the budget that you were just presented tonight, tax rate for which will be set next fall. When I compare the operating budget expenditures, the anticipated revenue, adequacy aid from the state portion of education taxes, I come to a local effort of $9.3 million versus $9.2 million. It's a $36,000 difference year to year. When these numbers were restated in the fall, that came to $12.04 for those budgeted components. But then we had a revision to our revenue estimates, which actually added 8 cents to the tax rate. And we returned money from the undesignated fund balance, which reduced the tax rate by 97 cents, which brought us to a local school tax rate of $11.15, a state education tax rate of $2.32, for a total of $13.47, which is what you probably saw in your bills. For the budget, there's a couple of big gaps there. So I don't know what the fund balance is going to be at the end of this year. The revenue estimates are in the budget now as our best estimates. When we get around to the fall, of course, we'll be revising them again. The school tax only at this point is $12.08 with a recalculated state education tax. They've given us the state has determined what the education tax will be, but the rate is calculated on a prior year assessed value. So restating it for the current value, it brings it to $2.35 for a total of $14.43 or a 96-cent increase. Again, offsetting the 97-cent decrease in the prior year. The information from the town office tells me that the median household value in Littleton right now is $153,600. So that has the potential of raising $147 of additional tax for that homeowner.
So that's with no fund balance?
That's correct. Just as stated right today, the revenue is as is right now, and no assumption of any fund balance going forward. Mr. Ward.
I watched the last, as I mentioned before, but the budget hearing, whether you were asked as to why no fund balance was being estimated this year. If the school board does not put a number in here, to the best of my knowledge, it'll be the first school board. I first started serving in 1981, where there was not a good faith effort to plug a number in as to what. The rule of thumb, at least what I learned when I worked on budgets, is that a good operable number is in the 2 to 3% range of what you budget, which would be 330 to 485, which I think fits in somewhat within your historical experience. We had this past year, I know at the time of the encumbrance debate, there was projected $900,000 surplus, and I believe it got over $1 million. Is that true, Tom?
Then there was, before retention.
Before you took the warrant articles out and the emergency fund. So last year you had $1 million, and this year you're predicting nothing. I really think you should plug in a number, be conservative. Go with 2%, go with 3%, but you should show that. And the reason that you do that is the reason we hire superintendents and finance managers and have school boards is to look out for the economic interest. I know you're trying to do that. And one of the ways you look out for the interest is returning some money back to the community to offset it. And do I expect you, or anyone else expect you to generate $1 million return? No, that was, from what I remember, there was 3 things that kind of drove that up. The special ed tuition, out-of-district tuition was considerably lower than what had been budgeted. You had retirement, and you weren't sure what your labor costs were less as far as per employee, and you also, your health insurance came in less. Those things were the drivers, which were good things, that we were able to save money on that. But you will be the first board not to plug in a number. And I really recommend, be conservative, go with 2%, 2.5%, somewhere along that line. And the reason, I mean, you have a superintendent going full-time. Theoretically, he's looking out, along with Tom, to return some money to the taxpayers. Not expected for $1 million, but not to build in anything. You'll be the first board to do that, and I don't think that's a good place to be. I think that's part of why professionals are hired, to bring money back to the taxpayers to offset it. So I urge you to plug a number in.
Just as a point of interest, if the number were 250,000, it would have about a 32-cent effect. So you can go from there. 500 to be 64, and 750 and beyond. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
In closing, I'd just like to say to members of the public that if they would like more details on the budget, they can call us at 444-5215. As a point of personal privilege, I really want to thank the principals, the support staff, the folks in administration who worked very hard in putting this budget together. I really particularly want to recognize Tom Mangles and Kathy Thompson, who really went much above and beyond in helping things out. And if there are no further questions, I'll turn this back to Jim. Just dismiss? Yes. Oh, yes. This presentation will be placed on the website. Thank you.